In the vast darkness between stars, where civilized species fear to tread, a desperate cry for help echoes through the void. The Zephyrian colony ship Harmony burns in space, its passengers facing extinction from raiders who show no mercy. Their distress beacon screams across light years, hoping against hope that anyone, will hear their plea. But the galaxy's peacekeepers are too far away, their rescue fleet's days from arrival. Instead, the signal reaches a small, blue-green world on the galactic rim, a planet so dangerous that star maps mark it with warning symbols, a world whose inhabitants are whispered about in fearful tones across 1,000 systems. They call it a death world. Its people? Deathworlders. The raiders think they're safe. The Zephyrians think they're doomed. Neither knows that somewhere in the black, engines are lighting up and weapons are being loaded. Because when Earth's children hear a cry for help, they don't ask if it's convenient. They don't calculate the odds. They don't wait for permission. They answer the call. And the galaxy is about to remember why predators should fear the pack that hunts together. Commander Zaraka pressed her scaled hands against the viewport of the colony ship Harmony, watching helplessly as another escape pod winked out of existence under the pirates' plasma fire. The gentle Zephyrians around her wept openly, their crystalline tears catching the emergency lighting as their home burned around them. "How long until the patrol fleet arrives?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would bring no comfort. 73 hours, Commander," replied her communications officer, his normally melodious voice cracking with despair. "The nearest galactic defense station is in the Kepler sector." 73 hours. The raiders would be finished with their butchery in 3. The Corvin Syndicate ships circled the Harmony like scavengers around a corpse, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that violated a dozen interstellar treaties. They had appeared without warning, dropping out of hyperspace in a coordinated assault that caught the peaceful colony ship completely defenseless. Now they took their time, carving through the ship's sections methodically, harvesting whatever struck their fancy: cargo, technology, and, worse. Zaraka had seen Corvin raids before. They were thorough. They were brutal. And they never left witnesses. "Continue broadcasting the distress signal on all frequencies," she ordered, knowing it was futile. "Full spectrum, emergency priority." Her communications officer's tendrils drooped with exhaustion, but he complied. For 18 hours, they had been screaming into the void, hoping that anyone, might hear their desperate plea for help. The galaxy was vast, and help was far away, but Zaraka refused to let her people die in silence. The ship shuddered as another plasma torpedo found its mark. Through the viewport, she could see the raiders' boarding craft latching onto the hull like parasites. Soon they would cut through, and then. She forced herself not to think about what came next. "Commander!" The communications officer's voice suddenly carried a note of desperate hope. "I'm receiving a response to our distress beacon." Zaraka spun around, her heart racing. "The patrol fleet?" "No, ma'am. This is coming from the Sol system." A chill ran down Zaraka's spine. Every species in the known galaxy had heard whispers of Sol, the forbidden system on the galactic rim. It was marked on every star chart with warning symbols, a quarantine world where evolution had gone terribly wrong, producing creatures so dangerous that the Galactic Council had voted unanimously to avoid all contact. Death world. The humans' planet was a death world. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. The signal is strong and clear. They're requesting our position and tactical information about our attackers." For a moment, Zaraka hesitated. The stories about humans were legendary throughout the galaxy, savage creatures who had somehow developed space travel despite their world's attempts to kill them. They were predators who hunted in packs, who turned violence into an art form, who knew nothing of the gentle ways of civilized species. But, as another section of her ship exploded, showering debris against the viewport, she realized she was past the point of having choices. "Transmit our coordinates," she ordered. "Tell them we have 15,000 civilians aboard and that the raiders show no mercy to prisoners." As her officer worked frantically at his console, Zaraka found herself wondering if she had just called upon one group of monsters to save them from another. The humans had been quarantined for good reason. Their own planet had tried to kill them for millions of years, forging them into something that no civilized species could understand or trust. But perhaps that was exactly what they needed now. The next few hours passed in agonizing slowness. The Corvan raiders continued their methodical assault, breaching section after section of the colony ship. Civilians huddled in emergency shelters while the ship's minimal security forces fought desperate holding actions in the corridors. Every few minutes, another compartment would be lost, another group of innocents would fall to the raiders' weapons. Zaraka paced the bridge, her mind racing through increasingly desperate scenarios. Even if the humans answered their call, what could they possibly do? Sol was weeks away by conventional hyperspace travel. By the time any rescue arrived, the Harmony would be nothing but drifting debris. "Commander," her tactical officer called out, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm detecting massive hyperspace distortions. Multiple contacts, bearing, they're everywhere." "What do you mean everywhere?" "I count at least 50 hyperspace signatures, all around our position. They're coming out of hyperspace in a coordinated formation." Zaraka rushed to the tactical display, her eyes widening as she saw the sensor readings. The humans hadn't sent a single rescue ship, they had sent a fleet. A vast, coordinated armada that was materializing out of hyperspace with precision that made her military training quiver with admiration. "How did they get here so fast?" she breathed. Her communications officer looked up from his console, his face pale with disbelief. "Commander, I'm reading their hyperspace signatures. These ships, they're not using standard hyperspace drives." "What are they using?" "I don't know. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. It's as if they're folding space itself." Before Zaraka could respond, her viewport exploded with light. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace like sharks breaking the surface of an ocean, their ships unlike anything she had ever seen. Where Galactic Council vessels were smooth and graceful, built for exploration and peaceful contact, these ships were predatory. Every line spoke of violence barely contained, every weapon mount was designed for maximum destructive effect. The largest ship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even the Harmony, positioned itself between the colony ship and the Corvan raiders. Its hull was scarred with battle damage from a dozen conflicts, and weapon ports opened along its flanks like the eyes of some primordial beast. "This is Admiral Sarah Chin of the Terran Defense Fleet," came a voice over the communications channel, crisp and professional despite the static of battlefield interference. "Zephyrian Vessel Harmony, we have received your distress call. You are now under the protection of the human Commonwealth. Please maintain your current position while we deal with your uninvited guests." Zaraka found her voice. "Admiral Chen, there are 12 Corvan heavy raiders. They outgun us completely and, we see them," Chen's voice cut through her warning with casual confidence. "Don't worry. We've dealt with worse." On the tactical display, Zaraka watched in amazement as the human fleet moved with coordination that defied belief. Smaller ships, sleek destroyers and cruisers float around the larger vessels like a school of predatory fish, their movements so precise they seemed choreographed. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be at every moment. The Corvan raiders, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of an unknown fleet, scrambled to form a defensive formation. Their leader, a massive battlecruiser bristling with weapons, swung toward the human dreadnought with obvious intent. "Unknown vessels," the Corvan commander's harsh voice crackled over the general frequency, "withdraw immediately or face the consequences. This prize is ours by right of conquest." Admiral Chen's response was calm and measured. "Corvan vessels, you are engaged in piracy against civilian targets. You have exactly 60 seconds to disengage and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The Corvan commander's laughter was like grinding metal. "You think to frighten us with threats, unknown species? We are the Corvan Syndicate. We take what we want, and we bow to no one." 55 seconds, Chen replied without emotion. For a moment, the space between the two fleets seemed suspended in time. Then, the Corvan battlecruiser opened fire, sending a devastating barrage of plasma torpedoes and particle beams toward the human dreadnought. Zaraka held her breath, certain she was about to witness the destruction of their would-be rescuers. The Corvin weapons were military-grade, designed to crack the hulls of capital ships. Nothing could survive that kind of firepower. The human dreadnoughts' shields flared to life, and the Corvin barrage struck them like waves against a cliff. Energy cascaded harmlessly around the ship's hull, dispersing into space without leaving so much as a scorch mark. Impressive shields, Admiral Chen's voice came over the calm, still maddeningly calm. Our turn. What happened next would be burned into Zaraka's memory for the rest of her life. The human dreadnought returned fire with a single weapon, a massive kinetic cannon that launched a projectile at near light speed. The tungsten rod, no larger than a telephone pole, struck the Corvin battlecruiser amidships with the force of a small asteroid. The raider ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive warship capable of destroying entire colonies. The next, there was only an expanding cloud of superheated plasma and debris. The other Corvin ships reeled in shock, their formation dissolving as their flagship vanished in an instant. What did you just do? Zaraka whispered. Kinetic kill vehicle, Chen explained, as if discussing the weather. Relativistic tungsten rod. Simple physics, really. Mass times velocity equals dead pirates. The remaining Corvin ships, faced with technology they couldn't comprehend and firepower that defied their understanding, made the only rational choice. They turned and ran, their engines redlining as they desperately clawed for escape velocity. They didn't make it. The human fleet moved with surgical precision, smaller ships intercepting the fleeing raiders while larger vessels positioned themselves to cut off escape routes. It wasn't a battle, it was a perfectly executed hunt, with the humans playing the role of apex predators and the Corvins reduced to panicked prey. Within minutes, it was over. 11 Corvin ships hung dead in space, their hulls breached and their crews either dead or surrendering. The 12th, a smaller frigate, limped away at sublight speed, its engines too damaged for hyperspace travel. Should we pursue? One of the human captains asked over the fleet channel. Negative, Admiral Chan replied. Let them go. Someone needs to spread the word about what happens to pirates in human space. As the immediate threat ended, Zaraka found herself staring at the tactical display in stunned silence. The human fleet had destroyed or disabled an entire Corvin raiding flotilla in less than 10 minutes. She had never seen such overwhelming firepower deployed with such clinical precision. Zephyrian vessel harmony. Admiral Chen's voice came over the comm again. This is Admiral Chen. We're dispatching medical teams and damage control parties to assist your wounded. Are you in immediate need of life support or structural integrity assistance? We. Zaraka struggled to find words. Admiral, how did you get here so quickly? Seoul is weeks away by hyperspace. We were already in the neighborhood, Chen replied with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. We've been tracking Corvin raider activity in this sector for months. Your distress call just gave us the excuse we needed to finally do something about it. As human shuttles began docking with the Harmony, bringing medical supplies and engineering teams, Zaraka realized that everything she thought she knew about the galaxy had just changed. The humans weren't the savage barbarians the stories claimed. They were something far more dangerous, they were protectors with the power to back up their promises. And they had answered a call for help from complete strangers without hesitation. The galaxy, she suspected, was about to become a very different place. Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped off the shuttle and into a nightmare. The corridors of the Zephyrian colony ship Harmony were scorched and twisted from plasma fire, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across walls stained with substances she preferred not to identify. Behind her, a team of human medics and engineers filed out of the shuttle, their faces grim but determined. Christ, muttered Sergeant Torres, Elena's security escort, as he surveyed the damage. Those Corvin bastards really did a number on this place. Elena nodded, already moving toward the nearest group of wounded Zephyrians. The aliens huddled together in what had once been a passenger lounge, their crystalline bodies dulled with shock and pain. She had studied Zephyrian physiology during her xenobiology training, but seeing their injuries firsthand made her stomach clench with sympathy. It's okay, she said softly, kneeling beside a young Zephyrian whose arm hung at an unnatural angle. I'm a doctor. We're here to help. The alien's large, multifaceted eyes fixed on her with a mixture of hope and terror. Like most species in the galaxy, the Zephyrians had grown up hearing stories about humans, tales of savage Deathworlders who knew only violence and conquest. Finding themselves being tended by the very creatures they had been taught to fear must have been deeply unsettling. Elena worked quickly and efficiently, her medical training taking over. The Zephyrian's arm wasn't broken, just dislocated, a simple fix with the portable bone regenerator from her kit. As she worked, she spoke in gentle tones, explaining what she was doing and why. "There," she said as the regenerator completed its work. "Good as new. Try moving it slowly." The young Zephyrian flexed their arm experimentally, their eyes widening in amazement as they realized the pain was gone. Around them, other wounded aliens watched with growing hope as Elena's team spread out through the damaged sections, bringing medical aid to anyone who needed it. Meanwhile, in the ship's engineering section, Commander Jake Sullivan was having a conversation with the Harmony's chief engineer, an elderly Zephyrian named Kethare whose whiskers trembled with nervous energy. "Your hyperdrive is completely fried," Jake said, running his scanner over the twisted remains of the ship's primary engine. "Those plasma torpedoes cooked the control matrix. You're not going anywhere under your own power." Kethare's shoulders sagged with defeat. "Then, we are stranded. Our people will die slowly instead of quickly." "Hey, nobody's dying on my watch," Jake replied firmly. He pulled out his communication device and contacted the fleet. "Admiral Chen, this is Sullivan. The Harmony's hyperdrive is beyond repair. We're going to need to arrange transport for 15,000 civilians." Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the comm. "Roger that, Commander. How long will you need to stabilize their life support?" "Give me 6 hours and I'll have them running at full efficiency. These Zephyrian systems are actually pretty elegant once you figure out how they work." As Jake and his engineering teams got to work, Commander Zaraka found herself aboard the human dreadnought Indomitable, standing in Admiral Chen's ready room and trying to process everything that had happened. The room was spartanly furnished but comfortable, with pictures of Earth hanging on the walls, images of blue oceans, green forests, and snow-capped mountains that looked impossibly beautiful to someone who had spent her entire life in space. "I apologize for the deception," Admiral Chen was saying as she poured 2 cups of coffee. "When we said we were in the neighborhood, we weren't entirely truthful." "What do you mean?" Zaraka asked, accepting the steaming cup gratefully. The liquid was bitter but warming, and she found herself appreciating the human custom. "We've been operating in this sector for the past 3 months, Chen explained. Intelligence suggested that Corvan radar activity was increasing, and the Galactic Council seemed reluctant to address the problem decisively." Zaraka nearly choked on her coffee. "You've been operating outside human space for 3 months? But the quarantine is still officially in effect," Chen interrupted smoothly. "Let's just say that recent events have caused us to reconsider our isolationist policies. When innocent people are being slaughtered while the galaxy's peacekeepers debate the proper diplomatic response, well, sometimes direct action becomes necessary." The implications of this statement hit Zaraka like a physical blow. The humans weren't just responding to a single distress call, they were actively patrolling the galaxy, hunting pirates and protecting trade routes that the Galactic Council had essentially abandoned to raiders. "How many ships do you have out here?" she asked. "Enough," Chen replied with a slight smile. "The Commonwealth takes the protection of innocent life very seriously, regardless of species. We learned long ago that predators respect only strength, and sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to punch them in the nose." A chime from Chen's communication console interrupted their conversation. "Admiral, this is Dr. Vasquez. I'm finished with the emergency medical work aboard the Harmony. You need to see this." Chen frowned. "What is it, Doctor?" "I'd rather show you in person, ma'am. It's disturbing." 20 minutes later, Zaraka found herself following Admiral Chen and Dr. Vasquez through the damaged sections of her own ship, heading toward an area she had avoided since the attack began. The ship's brig had been one of the first targets of the Corvan boarding parties, and what they had found there defied description. They weren't just taking cargo, Dr. Vasquez explained grimly as they approached the cells. They were taking people. Specifically, they were taking young adults and children. Zaraka's blood ran cold. She had suspected as much, but confirmation made it no less horrifying. The slave markets on Korvax Prime, she whispered. We liberated 47 of your people from the raiders' ships, Chen said quietly. They're receiving medical treatment aboard the Indomitable. But Elena's scans suggest there were more. Dr. Vasquez nodded, her face pale but determined. Based on the evidence I found in these cells and the cargo manifests we recovered from the raider ships, I estimate they had already taken at least 200 prisoners before we arrived. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. 200 Zephyrians, young people with their entire lives ahead of them, now somewhere in the vast criminal network that supplied the galaxy's black markets. They could be anywhere, sold to anyone for any purpose. The Corvan Syndicate operates on a strict schedule, Zaraka said finally. They rendezvous with transport ships every few weeks to transfer their cargo. If we could intercept already on it, Chen interrupted. We captured the raiders' navigation computers before scuttling their ships. My intelligence teams are analyzing their data now. If there's a pattern to their operations, we'll find it. As they made their way back to the shuttle bay, Zaraka found herself studying the human admiral with new eyes. Sarah Chen was not the savage barbarian of galactic legend. She was professional, competent, and, most surprisingly of all, deeply moral. The humans could have simply destroyed the raiders and left their obligation to the distress call fulfilled. Instead, they were actively working to rescue people who had already been taken. Why are you doing this? Zaraka asked suddenly. Your species has no obligation to us. According to galactic law, you shouldn't even be here. Chen paused at the shuttle hatch, turning to face the Zephyrian commander with serious eyes. Commander, my species evolved on a planet that spent 4 billion years trying to kill us. We survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, and predators that would give your worst nightmares. We learned early that the universe is a dangerous place, and the only thing standing between civilization and chaos is the willingness of good people to fight back against the darkness. She gestured toward the damaged corridors around them. You sent out a call for help, and we answered. It's that simple. Where we come from, when someone is in trouble, you help them. You don't calculate the cost or weigh the political implications. You help them because it's the right thing to do. Back aboard the Indomitable, the rescue operation continued with clockwork efficiency. Human transport ships arrived to take aboard the Harmony's passengers while engineering teams worked to repair the colony ship's critical systems. The Zephyrians, initially terrified of their rescuers, gradually began to relax as they realized that the humans' reputation for violence was matched only by their commitment to protecting the innocent. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, the fleet's chief intelligence officer, was working frantically in the ship's analysis center when she made the breakthrough they had been hoping for. The Corvan Raiders' computers had yielded a treasure trove of information about the Syndicate's operations, including rendezvous schedules, transport routes, and, most importantly, the location of their main slave processing facility. Admiral, she called excitedly, I found them. The missing Zephyrians, they're being held at a facility called Blackrock Station, 3 systems from here. According to these files, the next transport convoy is scheduled to depart in 18 hours. Admiral Chen studied the data on Santos's screen, her jaw tightening with determination. What kind of defenses are we looking at? Heavy. Blackrock Station is essentially a fortress built into an asteroid. Multiple orbital platforms, fighter squadrons, and enough firepower to hold off a small fleet. The Corvans use it as their main hub for the entire Outer Rim. Chen nodded slowly, her mind already working through the tactical possibilities. How many prisoners? Based on the traffic logs, at least 3,000 beings from a dozen different species. And that's just the ones scheduled for immediate transport. The weight of that number hung heavy in the air. 3,000 innocent people, trapped in the heart of a criminal empire that saw them as nothing more than merchandise. By the time the Galactic Council's slow-moving bureaucracy could organize a response, they would all be scattered across the galaxy's black markets. Ma'am, Santos continued quietly, there's something else. According to these files, the Corvins have been operating freely in this sector for over 2 years. They've raided 17 colony ships and 43 merchant vessels.
The total number of people they've taken. How many? Chen asked, though she dreaded the answer. Approximately 12,000 beings, Admiral. All sold into slavery while the galaxy watched and did nothing.
Admiral Chen stared at the tactical display for a long moment, weighing options and calculating risks. Blackrock Station was heavily defended, and an assault would be dangerous. They could easily request reinforcements from Earth, but that would take time that the prisoners didn't have. But then, she thought about the young Zephyri and Dr. Vasquez had treated, and the hope in their eyes when they realized the humans had come to help. She thought about Commander Zaraka's gratitude and the trust the Zephyrian people had placed in them. Most of all, she thought about the thousands of innocent beings suffering in Corvin cells, waiting for rescue that might never come. Santos, compile everything we have on Blackrock Station's defenses. I want detailed tactical analyses within 2 hours.
Yes, ma'am. Are we going after them? Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, we're going after them. The Corvins wanted to see what happens when they mess with innocent people. They're about to get a very educational demonstration. As word of the impending mission spread through the fleet, the human crews prepared for battle with quiet efficiency. Weapons were checked and rechecked, battle plans were studied and memorized, and prayers were said by those who believed in such things. They all knew the risks, but they also knew why they were fighting. Somewhere in the darkness of space, thousands of innocent beings waited for rescue. And the humans had never been very good at leaving people behind. The asteroid designated as Blackrock Station loomed against the starfield like a cancerous growth, its surface bristling with weapon emplacements and docking bays carved directly into the rock. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical display with the cold intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. Sensor analysis complete, Admiral, reported Lieutenant Commander Santos. The station's got some impressive hardware. 24 orbital defense platforms, each mounting heavy plasma cannons and torpedo launchers. Fighter bays carved into the asteroid itself can launch approximately 200 combat craft. And the station's main guns. She paused, double-checking her readings. They're military-grade capital ship killers. How military-grade are we talking? Asked Commander Reynolds, the fleet's tactical officer. Corvin Navy surplus, probably stolen during their civil war 15 years ago. These aren't pirate weapons, they're designed to crack dreadnought armor. Chen nodded grimly. The Corvin Syndicate had grown far beyond a simple pirate organization. They had become a shadow navy, operating with near impunity in the galaxy's outer reaches while the Galactic Council debated proper diplomatic responses to their atrocities. What about the prisoners? She asked. Santos highlighted a section of the asteroid on the main display. Thermal imaging suggests the holding facilities are located here, deep inside the station's core. Maximum security, multiple blast doors, and, according to the intelligence we captured, rigged with explosive charges in case of rescue attempts. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Corvins had turned their slave processing center into a fortress, and they were willing to murder their prisoners rather than lose their investment. Ma'am, came the voice of Captain Williams from the destroyer Tenacious, my ship is equipped with the new stealth systems. I could attempt a covert insertion, negative, Chen cut him off. If they detect you, those prisoners are dead. We need a different approach. She studied the tactical display for several more minutes, her mind working through possibilities and discarding them one by one. A frontal assault would trigger the station's defenses, resulting in the prisoners' deaths. Stealth insertion was too risky for the same reason. Negotiation was pointless, the Corvins would simply move their operation elsewhere. Then, an idea began to form, born from humanity's long history of turning impossible situations to their advantage. Santos, what's the station's power situation? They're drawing energy from a fusion reactor built into the asteroid's core. Heavily shielded, probably impregnable to our weapons. What about backup power? Santos frowned, pulling up additional sensor data. Emergency batteries for life support and essential systems. Why do you ask? Chen's smile was predatory. Because I think it's time the Corvins experienced a proper human hunting technique.
We're going to use their own strength against them. She turned to address the fleet channel.
All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We're going to implement Operation Blackout.
I want every ship equipped with quantum mines to begin deployment immediately. Create a grid pattern around the station. Nothing gets in or out without our permission.
Quantum mines?
Commander Zaraka, who had been observing from the bridge, looked confused.
I'm not familiar with that weapon. They're not exactly weapons, Chen explained. More like cosmic fishing nets. When activated, they create localized disruptions in subspace that prevent hyperspace travel. Anything caught in the field is stuck until we decide to let them go. As the human ships moved to establish their containment field, Chen opened a communication channel to Blackrock Station. The response came quickly, a scarred Corvin face appearing on the main screen, his cybernetic eye glowing red with malevolent intelligence. I am Warlord Thrax, master of Blackrock Station, the alien snarled.
You have made a grave error coming here, unknown species.
Withdraw now, or face the consequences of your foolishness.
This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet, she replied calmly. You are holding approximately 3,000 prisoners taken in illegal raids against civilian targets. You will release them immediately and surrender your station for processing by galactic authorities.
Thrax's laughter was like grinding metal. Humans!
I have heard whispers of your species, savage Deathworlders who know nothing but violence.
You think to threaten me?
I have the strongest fortress in this sector and enough firepower to reduce your primitive ships to scrap.
Last chance, Chen said evenly. Release the prisoners and surrender.
I have a counter-proposal, Thrax sneered. Leave now, and I will kill only half of my slaves before you go. Stay, and I will execute them all while you watch helplessly. The communication cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chen stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to her tactical officer.
Reynolds, are the quantum mines in position? Yes, ma'am. The containment field is active. Good. Now let's show Warlord Thrax what happens when predators get trapped with an apex predator. She keyed the fleet channel. All ships, begin Phase 2 of Operation Blackout.
Target the station's sensor arrays and communication systems. I want them blind, deaf, and mute. The human fleet opened fire with surgical precision. Particle beams and kinetic rounds lanced through space, striking the station's external sensors with devastating accuracy. Within minutes, Blackrock Station's ability to see beyond its own hull was reduced to nothing.
What are they doing? Zaraka asked, watching the display in confusion. Those weren't critical hits. We're controlling the information flow, Chen explained. Right now, Thrax knows we're out here, but he can't see us. He doesn't know our exact positions, our fleet strength, or our capabilities. That uncertainty is going to work on his mind. As if to prove her point, Blackrock Station's defense platforms opened fire blindly into space, their plasma cannons painting the darkness with deadly light.
The shots went wide, striking nothing but empty vacuum as the human ships maintained safe distances. Return fire, asked Reynolds.
Not yet. Let them waste their ammunition shooting at shadows. We have time.
For the next hour, the station continued its desperate barrage while the human fleet remained essentially invisible. Chen watched the tactical display with satisfaction as the Corvin gunners grew increasingly frantic, their fire patterns becoming more erratic and wasteful.
Then came Phase 3. Launch the drones, Chen ordered.
From the bellies of the human ships, dozens of small, sleek craft emerged, not fighters, but sophisticated electronic warfare platforms. They spread out around Blackrock Station like a swarm of technological locusts, each one broadcasting carefully crafted signals designed to overwhelm and confuse the station's remaining sensors.
What are those?
Thrax's voice crackled over the communication system, his earlier confidence replaced by growing concern.
Psychological warfare, Chen replied pleasantly. My engineers call them ghost drones. They're projecting false sensor contacts all around your station.
Right now, your tactical displays are showing hundreds of ships that don't exist, weapon signatures that aren't there, and attack patterns that are pure fiction.
She was right.
From his command center deep within Blackrock Station, Warlord Thrax stared at sensor readings that showed an impossibly vast human fleet surrounding his fortress. Ships appeared and disappeared on his screens, weapon signatures blazed and faded, and his tactical computers couldn't make sense of the contradictory data.
This is impossible, he snarled at his sensor operator. How many ships are out there?
The terrified Corvan technician's claws clicked nervously on his console.
I cannot tell, Warlord. The readings are contradictory. Sometimes I see 50 ships, sometimes 500. The electromagnetic interference is unlike anything in our databases. Thrax's cybernetic eye flared with rage.
He had built his reputation on being the strongest predator in the sector, the Corvan that other Corvans feared. Now he was being hunted by creatures he didn't understand, using tactics that defied his experience.
Open fire with the main guns, he ordered. Full spread, maximum yield.
The station's primary weapons, massive plasma cannons designed to punch through capital ship armor, erupted in a spectacular display of destructive force. Energy beams capable of melting asteroids lanced through space, seeking targets that might not even exist.
They're burning through their power reserves, Santos reported from the Indomitables bridge. Those main guns draw enormous energy from their reactor.
At this rate, they'll drain their capacitors within 2 hours.
Perfect, Chen said with satisfaction. All ships, begin Phase 4. I want micro jumps every 10 minutes. Keep them guessing.
The human fleet began a carefully choreographed dance around Blackrock Station, using their superior engines to make short hyperspace jumps that repositioned them unpredictably. To the station's sensors, already confused by the ghost drones, it appeared that the human ships could teleport at will, vanishing from one location and instantly appearing in another.
For Thrax, it was a nightmare.
His enemy seemed to possess impossible technology, appearing and disappearing at will while his own weapons struck nothing but empty space. Worse, his ammunition stores were running low, his reactor was operating at dangerous levels, and his crew was beginning to panic. Warlord, his communications officer called out nervously, I'm receiving reports from the lower levels. Some of the prisoners are attempting to riot.
They seem to believe rescue is imminent. Thrax's claws extended in fury.
He had built his empire on fear, and now that fear was crumbling, his word spread that the infamous Blackrock Station was under siege.
If he couldn't regain control quickly, his entire criminal organization would collapse as subordinates realized he was not invincible.
Execute 50 prisoners, he ordered coldly.
Broadcast their deaths to the others. Show them what happens to those who defy me.
But, before his guards could carry out the order, the lights went out.
Throughout Blackrock Station, power died as the human fleet's electronic warfare drones completed their true mission.
They hadn't just been creating false sensor contacts, they had been mapping the station's power grid, identifying vulnerabilities, and, finally, executing a coordinated cyber attack that brought the fortress to its knees.
Emergency power only, came frantic reports from across the station. Main reactor offline, backup systems failing, artificial gravity fluctuating.
In the sudden darkness, with only emergency lighting providing minimal illumination, Thrax realized that his impregnable fortress had become his tomb. The humans had done the impossible, they had captured Blackrock Station without firing a single shot at its hull. Warlord Thrax, Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the station's communication system, somehow reaching them despite the power failure. Your weapons are offline, your sensors are dark, and your reactor is in emergency shutdown. Your fortress is now a drifting rock, completely at our mercy. Thrax gripped his command chair with white-knuckled claws, his cybernetic eye flickering as its power source fluctuated.
What do you want? The same thing I wanted an hour ago. Release the prisoners and surrender your station. The only difference now is that you no longer have a choice in the matter. Around the darkened station, human ships moved into position with predatory grace.
Boarding craft launched from the fleet, carrying Marines equipped with the latest combat armor and weapons. They docked with the station's hull and began cutting through the outer barriers with methodical precision.
You have 5 minutes to order your guards to stand down, Chin continued. After that, my Marines will consider any armed resistance as a threat to prisoner safety. I should mention that my Marines are volunteers from our special forces, soldiers who grew up on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. They're remarkably good at close-quarters combat. In his command center, Thrax weighed his rapidly diminishing options. He could order his guards to fight, but, in the darkness and confusion, with their communications disrupted and their spirits broken, they would be slaughtered by trained human soldiers. He could try to execute the prisoners as a final act of spite, but the humans had already demonstrated their ability to infiltrate his systems. They might stop him before he could complete the massacre. Or he could surrender and hope that these strange Deathworlders had some concept of mercy. The decision was made for him when the command center door exploded inward, revealing a squad of human Marines in powered armor. Their weapons were raised, targeting systems painting red dots on Thrax's chest, but they didn't fire immediately. Warlord Thrax, the lead Marine, said through his helmet speaker, "You are under arrest for piracy, slave trading, and crimes against sentient life. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to the Galactic Conventions on Prisoners of War." Looking into the glowing visors of the human soldiers, Thrax finally understood what the galaxy's legends had tried to tell him. These weren't savage barbarians, they were something far more dangerous. They were civilized beings with the skills and weapons of apex predators, held in check only by their own moral code. And that code demanded justice for the innocent. Slowly, carefully, Thrax raised his claws in surrender. The holding cells deep within Blackrock Station were a testament to calculated cruelty. As Sergeant First Class Marcus Torres led his Marine squad through the corridors, their helmet lights cutting through the emergency-lit darkness, he found himself fighting back waves of rage at what they discovered. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species huddled in cramped cells, their eyes wide with terror and desperate hope. "Easy there," Torres said softly as he approached a cell containing a group of young Zephyrians, their crystalline features dulled by malnutrition and fear. "We're here to get you out. You're safe now." Behind him, Corporal Sarah Kim worked on the cell's locking mechanism with her plasma cutter, the device making quick work of the Corvin security systems. "Sarge, these locks are biometrically coded to Corvin physiology. Someone really didn't want these people getting out." "Yeah, well, they didn't count on human stubbornness," Torres replied, watching as the cell door swung open. The prisoners inside shrank back initially, their terror of the armored humans evident, but gradually began to emerge as they realized their captors had been replaced by liberators. Throughout the station, similar scenes were playing out as human Marines systematically cleared each holding area. Dr. Elena Vasquez had established a triage center in what had been the station's main cargo bay, treating the most severely injured prisoners while coordinating the massive evacuation effort. "My God," she whispered as she examined an Altarian child who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The young being's wing membranes were damaged, probably from deliberate abuse, and their large eyes held a haunted look that no child should ever possess. "What kind of monsters do this to children?" "The kind that won't be doing it anymore," replied Captain James Mitchell, the Marine commander overseeing the prisoner liberation. His voice carried the cold anger that every human in the rescue operation felt, a barely contained fury at the systematic cruelty they had discovered. While the Marines continued their sweep of the prison levels, Admiral Chen found herself in Thrax's command center, studying the intelligence goldmine they had captured. The Corvin warlord sat in restraints, his cybernetic eye dark and lifeless now that the station's power grid had been systematically dismantled. 15 separate slave processing facilities, Lieutenant Commander Santos reported, scrolling through the captured data. "The Corvin Syndicate isn't just a pirate organization, it's an entire shadow economy built on human trafficking. They've got operations throughout the Outer Rim, all feeding into black markets that span half the galaxy." Chen studied the star charts displaying the Syndicate's network, her jaw tightening with each revelation. "How many prisoners total?" "Conservative estimate? 50,000 beings currently in their system. And that's not counting the ones they've already sold." The weight of that number settled over the command center like a physical presence. 50,000 innocent people, stolen from their families and sold like livestock to the galaxy's worst predators. It was a crime that demanded justice on a scale the Galactic Council seemed incapable of delivering.
"Admiral," came Captain Williams' voice over the communication system, "we've completed our sweep of the station.
Final count is 3,247 prisoners recovered. We also found evidence of other activities."
Chen's blood ran cold at the captain's tone.
"What kind of evidence?" "You need to see this in person, ma'am. I'm transmitting coordinates to your tactical display." 20 minutes later, Chen stood in a laboratory that would have been at home in humanity's darkest historical nightmares.
Experimentation chambers, surgical theaters, and rows of specimen jars lined the walls, containing biological samples that defied easy identification. "They were experimenting on them," Dr. Vasquez explained, her voice hollow with shock. "Trying to understand the biological differences between species, testing various forms of modification." Some of the survivors described procedures that... She trailed off, unable to continue. Chen closed her eyes, fighting the urge to return to Thrax's cell and personally demonstrate some human modifications to his anatomy.
"How many?"
"We've identified remains from at least 200 different beings.
The survivors suggest the program had been running for years." The revelation hit Chen like a physical blow.
The Corvin Syndicate hadn't just been trafficking slaves, they had been conducting systematic biological experiments on sentient beings, treating them as laboratory animals for their twisted research.
"Ma'am," Captain Williams added quietly, "there's more.
We found records of buyers."
The syndicate wasn't just supplying manual labor markets.
They were providing specimens for private collectors, illegal research facilities, and, worse. Some of the purchase orders specifically requested children. Admiral Chen had seen combat on 3 different worlds. She had witnessed the aftermath of terrorist attacks, natural disasters, and the horrors that desperate people inflicted on each other when civilization broke down. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for the calculated, industrial-scale evil they had uncovered in Blackrock Station. "Burn it," she said finally, her voice carrying the cold fury of absolute judgment. "When we're done evacuating the survivors and extracting intelligence, I want this entire facility reduced to atomic ash. Nothing of this place should survive to inspire copycats." As the evacuation continued, word of the human rescue operation began to spread throughout the sector. The quantum mine field around Blackrock Station prevented hyperspace travel, but subspace communication was still possible, and the galaxy's information networks buzzed with rumors of the impossible. On the Galactic Council station at Proxima Centauri, Ambassador Veltar of the Eltarian Republic stared at the preliminary reports with disbelief.
"You're telling me that a human fleet destroyed an entire Corvin raiding flotilla and captured Blackrock Station in less than 6 hours?" His aide, a nervous Zephyrian diplomat, confirmed the information with trembling hands.
"The reports are consistent across multiple sources, Ambassador. The humans apparently materialized out of nowhere, eliminated the raiders' fleet, and then executed a complex assault on the most heavily fortified pirate base in the Outer Rim."
"Impossible," Veltar muttered. "Blackrock Station was considered impregnable."
"The Corvin Syndicate has been operating from there for over a decade, and every military analysis suggested it would take a major fleet action to dislodge them."
"Sir, there's more. According to the intelligence we've gathered, the humans didn't destroy the station.
They captured it intact and liberated over 3,000 prisoners." Veltar's wings rustled with agitation. The Galactic Council had been aware of the Corvin Syndicate's activities for years, but bureaucratic gridlock and political considerations had prevented decisive action. The Outer Rim territories were technically outside the Council's jurisdiction, and mounting a military operation would have required unprecedented cooperation between member species.
Yet somehow, the quarantined humans had accomplished what the galaxy's greatest powers had deemed impossible.
"What about casualties?" he asked. "That's the most remarkable part, sir. According to our sources, the human fleet suffered 0 casualties. Not a single ship damaged, not a single soldier injured. They executed a perfect military operation against superior numbers and firepower." Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, Commander Zaraka found herself in the ship's medical bay, watching Dr. Vasquez treat a group of rescued Zephyrian children. The human doctor worked with infinite patience, using a combination of advanced medical technology and gentle compassion to heal both physical injuries and psychological trauma.
Why do you do this? Zaraka asked quietly.
Your species could have remained isolated, safe behind your quarantine barrier. Instead, you risk your lives for people you've never met.
Dr. Vasquez looked up from the young patient she was examining, considering the question seriously.
My grandfather fought in the Second World War, a conflict on our planet over a century ago. He used to tell me about liberating concentration camps, finding people who had been systematically brutalized by an enemy that saw them as less than human. She returned her attention to the child, using a neural regenerator to heal damage from Corvin conditioning techniques. He said the look in their eyes, the moment when they realized they were safe, that someone had come for them, was worth every risk he had taken.
That's why we do this.
Because everyone deserves to be free, regardless of what species they were born as. The simple honesty of the answer struck Zaraka more powerfully than any military demonstration. She was beginning to understand that humanity's strength didn't come from their technology or their tactical skills, though both were formidable. It came from an unshakable belief that protecting the innocent was worth any sacrifice. In the station's main cargo bay, the evacuation was nearing completion. Human transport ships had arrived to ferry the rescued prisoners to safety, while specialized medical vessels prepared to treat the most severely injured. The operation proceeded with military precision, but every human involved understood they were not just moving cargo, they were returning stolen lives to freedom. Sergeant Torres paused in his duties to watch a group of young Altarians board a transport ship, their damaged wings bandaged but their spirits beginning to recover. One of them, a girl who couldn't have been more than 12, looked back at him and offered a tentative smile. "You take care of yourself, kid," he said softly, knowing she probably couldn't understand his words but hoping she could hear the warmth in his voice. As the last transport departed, Admiral Chen stood in Blackrock Station's former command center, watching the displays that showed the Corvin Syndicate's entire network. They had captured more than just a single facility, they had uncovered the blueprint for a criminal empire that spanned dozens of systems. "What are our orders regarding the other facilities?" asked Captain Mitchell. Chen studied the tactical displays for a long moment, then made a decision that would reshape the balance of power in the Outer Rim. "We're going to shut them down. All of them." "Ma'am, that's a massive undertaking. We're talking about operations across multiple sectors, some of them heavily defended." "Then, we'll call for reinforcements," Chen replied calmly. "The Commonwealth has been looking for an excuse to expand our presence in this region. The Corvin Syndicate just gave us all the justification we need." As the human fleet prepared to depart Blackrock Station, leaving only a small crew to extract the last of the intelligence data before destroying the facility, the galaxy's information networks continued to buzz with news of the impossible rescue. The humans, the feared Deathworlders of legend, had emerged from their quarantine not as conquerors, but as liberators. And, in the darkness between stars, where predators had once hunted with impunity, a new kind of hunter was beginning to prowl. One that turned its deadly skills against those who preyed upon the innocent, and showed no mercy to those who dealt in the suffering of others. The galaxy, Admiral Chen reflected as she watched Blackrock Station's destruction light up the darkness, was about to become a much safer place for the innocent and a much more dangerous place for their predators. 6 months after the liberation of Blackrock Station, the galaxy had become a very different place. In the Galactic Council chambers on Proxima Centauri, an emergency session was in progress, with representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to address what media outlets were calling the human question. Ambassador Veltar of the Altarian Republic stood at the central podium, his ceremonial wings spread wide as he addressed the assembly. Honored delegates, in the past half-year, human forces have conducted 47 separate military operations against criminal organizations throughout the Outer Rim. 17 major pirate strongholds have been destroyed, over 200 criminal vessels have been captured or eliminated, and more than 30,000 prisoners have been liberated from illegal trafficking operations. A murmur ran through the assembly, some voices expressing approval, others concern, and a few outright fear. The question before us today, Veltar continued, is how to respond to this unprecedented expansion of human activity beyond their quarantine system. Do we treat them as allies who have accomplished what our own forces could not?
Or do we consider them a threat to galactic stability? From her seat in the observer's gallery, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the proceedings with interest. She had been invited to address the council as a special diplomatic observer, though everyone present understood that her real role was to represent humanity's interests in whatever decision emerged from these deliberations. The humans have violated every principle of galactic law, declared Ambassador Korthvel of the Corvan Republic, his scarred features twisted with indignation. They operate without authorization, recognize no territorial boundaries, and execute military actions without consulting proper authorities. This is nothing less than an invasion disguised as humanitarian intervention. With respect, Ambassador Korthvel, replied Representative Sha'are of the Zephyrian colonies, the areas where humans have been operating were essentially lawless regions that your own government refused to patrol. The Corvan Syndicate was operating with impunity while the Council debated proper diplomatic responses. Chen found herself appreciating the Zephyrian representative's support, though she understood the complex politics at play. The revelation that the Corvan Syndicate had connections to the legitimate Corvan government had sent shockwaves through the galactic community, exposing decades of corruption and willful blindness to criminal activities. The humans' methods may be direct, continued Sha'are, but their results speak for themselves. Trade routes that have been plagued by piracy for years are now safe. Colonies that lived in fear of raiders can finally focus on growth and development. And thousands of beings who thought they would die in slavery are free. At what cost? Countered Ambassador Thexnor of the Vegan Confederacy, his multiple arms gesturing emphatically. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that dwarf our own fleets. Their ships appear and disappear at will, their weapons technology is centuries ahead of our own, and their tactical coordination suggests a level of military development that should terrify any rational being. Chen shifted in her seat, understanding the delegates' concerns but also recognizing the fundamental misunderstanding at their core. The galaxy's species had developed along very different evolutionary paths than humanity, leading to technological and social structures that prioritized cooperation and consensus over competitive advancement. If I may, she said, rising from her seat and addressing the assembly directly, I think there's been a fundamental miscommunication about humanity's intentions. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to the human admiral. This was the moment she had been preparing for during the long journey from the Outer Rim, the chance to explain her species' actions to the galactic community. Honored delegates, Chen began, my species has never sought to conquer or dominate other civilizations. Our history is one of survivors who learned long ago that the universe is a dangerous place, and that sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to fight back against those who would harm them. She activated a holographic display showing the rescue operations of the past 6 months. Every action we have taken has been in response to criminal activities that the proper authorities seemed unable or unwilling to address. We didn't seek out these conflicts, they found us when innocent people called for help. Ambassador Korthvel's cybernetic implants whirred as he processed this information. You claim to be protectors, yet your methods are those of conquerors. Your fleets strike without warning, your weapons destroy without mercy, and your soldiers show no quarter to their enemies. We show no quarter to slavers, pirates, and those who torture innocent beings for profit, Chen replied calmly. If that makes us dangerous to criminals, then I consider that a positive development. But who decides what constitutes criminal behavior? Asked Ambassador Thexnor. What prevents you from expanding these humanitarian interventions to include targets that simply oppose human interests? It was a fair question, and Chen had expected it. The same thing that has prevented us from expanding beyond Sol System for the past 3 centuries, our own moral code. Humanity operates under strict ethical guidelines that prohibit aggression against peaceful civilizations. We fight only to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Ethics can change, pointed out the vegan ambassador. What guarantees do we have that future human leaders will maintain these same principles? Chen smiled grimly. The same guarantee you have with any civilization, our track record and our word. But, if you need something more concrete, I'm prepared to offer formal agreements. She activated another holographic display, this one showing detailed proposals that had been prepared by the Commonwealth's diplomatic corps. The human Commonwealth is prepared to enter into mutual defense treaties with any civilization that desires our protection. We will also establish formal rules of engagement that limit our military activities to genuine humanitarian crises. The assembly erupted in surprised discussion. The quarantined humans were offering to become official protectors of galactic civilization, a role that the Council's own forces had proven inadequate to fulfill. In exchange, Chen continued, we ask only for the right to establish waystations in strategic locations throughout the galaxy, and access to galactic communication networks so we can respond more quickly to distress calls. Ambassador Veltar studied the proposed agreements carefully. You're asking for what amounts to a permanent military presence throughout known space. We're asking for the infrastructure necessary to protect innocent life, Chen corrected. Our waystations would be small facilities focused on logistics and communication, not invasion bases. And our fleets would operate under galactic oversight, with regular reporting to Council authorities. Over the next several hours, the debate continued as delegates examined the human proposals from every angle. Some saw the offer as a godsend, professional military protection from a species that had proven both capable and principled. Others worried about the long-term implications of allowing Deathworlders to establish a permanent presence in galactic space. During a recess in the formal proceedings, Chen found herself in a private meeting with several key ambassadors, including Sha'are and Veltar. The conversation was more relaxed than the formal debates, allowing for the kind of honest discussion that rarely occurred in public forums. Your species fascinates me, admitted Veltar, pouring a cup of Altarian ceremonial tea. You evolved on a planet that tried to kill you for millions of years, yet you emerged not as savage destroyers, but as protectors of other civilizations. How do you explain this apparent contradiction? Chen accepted the tea gratefully, considering her words carefully. I think it's because of our evolutionary history, not despite it. When everything in your environment is trying to kill you, you learn the value of cooperation and mutual protection. Humans have always been pack hunters. We survive by working together and looking out for the weakest members of our group. But that doesn't explain your willingness to extend that protection to alien species, observed Sha'are. It does if you understand that humans define pack very broadly, Chen replied with a slight smile. When we heard Commander Zaraka's distress call, our immediate response wasn't to calculate the political implications or consider the cost-benefit analysis. It was to think, someone is in trouble and needs help. That's just how we're wired. The private conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Chen's communication device. She frowned as she read the incoming data, then looked up at the assembled ambassadors. Speak of the devil, she said. I just received word that we've intercepted another distress call, this time from a vegan colony ship under attack by hegemony raiders in the Arcturus sector. Ambassador Thexnor's multiple arms stiffened with alarm. The Peaceful Dawn? That ship carries 10,000 civilians. According to our intelligence, the hegemony has deployed a full battle squadron to capture the ship. They're apparently planning to sell the passengers to private buyers in the Omega Nebula. Chen stood, her military bearing evident. My fleet can be there in 18 hours, but only if we leave immediately. The three ambassadors exchanged glances, the weight of the moment evident. Here was a perfect test case. Would they trust the humans to act as protectors, or would political considerations triumph over the lives of innocent beings? The Council hasn't voted on your proposals yet, Veltar pointed out. I'm aware of that, Chen replied. But those people need help now, not after we finish debating procedural issues. Sha'are was the first to speak. Go, she said firmly. Save them. We'll deal with the political implications later. Ambassador Thexnor hesitated for only a moment before nodding agreement. The Peaceful Dawn carries members of my own species. If you can save them. We'll save them, Chen assured him. That's what we do. As Admiral Chen departed for her ship, leaving behind promises and hopes in equal measure, the Galaxy Council continued its historic debate. By the time her fleet reached the Arcturus sector and began their rescue operation, the first formal votes were being cast on the human proposals. The results, when they came, were closer than anyone had expected. The motion to accept humanity as official protectors of galactic civilization passed by a narrow margin, 63% in favor, with significant opposition from conservative factions who still feared the Deathworld species. But the vote was ultimately irrelevant. As news of the successful rescue of the Peaceful Dawn spread throughout the galaxy, public opinion shifted decisively in humanity's favor. The images of human Marines carrying wounded civilians to safety, of human doctors treating alien patients with infinite care, of human engineers risking their lives to repair damaged life support systems, these images spoke louder than any political debate. Within a year, human way stations began appearing throughout the galaxy, staffed by volunteers who had sworn an oath to protect all sentient life. The Commonwealth's fleets patrolled trade routes that had been plagued by piracy for decades, their presence alone enough to deter most criminal activity. And, when distress calls echoed through the darkness between stars, they were no longer answered by overworked patrol ships or reluctant bureaucrats. They were answered by humanity, a species that had learned through bitter experience that the strong had a duty to protect the weak, and that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to be ready for war. The galaxy, for the first time in generations, began to feel truly safe. Years later, children across 100 worlds would grow up hearing stories of the humans, the Deathworlders who came from a planet where everything tried to kill them, but who chose to become guardians instead of conquerors. They would learn about Admiral Chan and the rescue of the Harmony, about the liberation of Blackrock Station, and about the countless other operations where human forces had stood between innocent life and those who would destroy it. And, when those children faced their own darkness, their own fears and challenges, they would remember that somewhere among the stars, protectors were watching. Guardians who had answered a simple distress call and changed the galaxy forever. The distress signal had indeed reached the wrong hands, wrong for the pirates and slavers who had thought the universe was their hunting ground, but exactly right for everyone else who still believed that civilization was worth defending.